But I find that your name is associated with all of this anyway. Your reputation's associated with it all anyway. And so, to just put it out there and make sure that everybody knows they could, because transparency is where trust comes from. And the most important thing you can have with a customer or with an employee is trust.
Hey everyone, I'm Peter Barron.
And I'm Brendan Schneider.
Yeah, and welcome to the Leadership Backstory podcast series. And, Brendan, today we've got a really cool guest who is the CEO of a company that I've been fascinated with since 2017, because I had the opportunity to connect with them way back when, and that's Vanessa Didyk. She's here with us. Hey, Vanessa, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Vanessa, the idea here is we want to hear your backstory. We want to understand like how you grew throughout your career and what were the lessons that you've taken and applied to, the work that you do at ZeeMee. And we'll get into ZeeMee. I've got tons of questions about ZeeMee, mainly because I'm fascinated with it. I've got a daughter who's about to enter into the college process, so maybe I can get some tips along the way here. But I was, looking at your career backstory, and there's some really interesting things. Like from the very beginning of your career, it looks like you were like injected with entrepreneurial spirit. Right. And I'd love to start, we'll go back as far as you like, but kind of if you can tap into that and walk us through it, I'd love to hear more about those early days.
Sure. Yeah. I think I was always like a leader in school and, always running for like class president and school president and that kind of stuff, even in elementary school. I think I was trying to think back and, to prep for this. And like, I remember in 5th grade creating like an all-girls flag football team because there were only boys flag football team.
Oh, that's awesome.
But my backstory is not one of those where I was running a lemonade stand or, selling stuff or running businesses at like, age 5. Like that was not me. But I was doing things that were always leadership oriented and just really liked being like a team captain. And so I think I was really drawn to that. And I think part of that is because of my parents. So my dad's an entrepreneur. He actually is the reason that it's legal to sell hot dogs and food at all on the streets in San Francisco. So he was the first, the guy that made it legal. He came from Queens, New York, and came to San Francisco and was like, why is there no food on the streets? And so he fought for it and has been running this business for 45 years or something since. So he's kind of the original. So that's on one side.
He deserves a high five.
Yeah, he should be on the podcast.
Is
really,
that the dirty water hot dog? Is that what that is?
He's got the best, the cleanest carts you've ever seen. My dad is meticulous about food safety.
I love that.
Yeah, so that's kind of on that side. And then my mom was a college professor. So at a community college. So the two I think probably made me who I am. And I don't know, after I graduated from college, I went to UC Berkeley, and after I tutored ever since I was like a little kid. I hated babysitting. And so instead I tutored, even in elementary school, I would tutor peers and make a little bit of cash. So that was sort of a natural thing for me to do. And I started my first company right out of college doing that.
Yeah, tell us about it. So it was called Scholar Station. Right out of college, you founded a tutoring company. Like, what made you think? I mean, you said you were tutoring all the way, through college and earlier, but like, what gave you the idea to pursue it and actually form it as a business?
Yeah, it was a couple things. So I worked for another company at the end of college and right after I graduated, and I kept having all these ideas, and I'd go talk to my dad and say, why don't they do this? And actually, those guys are good friends of mine still today. But I would go talk to my dad and I'd say, wait, why aren't they, building the business in this way? Or I just saw all these obvious kind of expansion areas and things to do. And my dad would say, why don't you start your own? And I was like, well, that seems like a lot of work. I should probably work for another one for a long time before I learn the business and really know how to do this. And he was like, or you just learn by doing, and you just get out there and you just do it. And at the time, I also, I have an autoimmune illness, and it was really hitting me hard around that time. And so working for somebody else didn't really make a lot of sense. And so I kind of liked the idea of forging my own path and being able to work when I wanted and and build the business the way that I wanted and support employees the way that I wanted to be supported. And so I think that was really a big piece of it too. So I kind of hung my shingle and got out there and said, I'm ready to do this. I hired a bunch of people and we kind of took that leap of faith, and then it grew and grew. And we had, at any given time, probably 60 tutors working. I went back and got a certificate in college advising and in professional editing, and then started doing that too. And the business just kept expanding throughout the Bay Area and San Francisco Bay Area. It just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And yeah, it was great. We had a really solid presence. I loved working with all the kids and training tutors and supporting people in that way, kind of leading everybody. It was so much fun.
Wait, Vanessa, I'm blown away by this. So you were just out of college and you had how many people? Up to like 60?
Yeah, it was amazing. And I lied to everybody about my age. Everybody. Like I would go and like any of these parents believed me, right? Like they saw this little, 24-year-old or whatever I was at the time coming in, and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm 28." Because for some reason I thought 28 made a lot more sense. And then
old.
when I was 26, I was telling people I was 29, and it was just. And then now I lie the other way, and it's a different it's a different story. Yeah.
Were you scared at all? Like, so here's my thing is I've recently gone out on my own.
Yeah.
Finally, after how many years hung my shingle, and I've explained it like I was 50% more excited than I ever have been in my life and 50% scared out of my mind. I couldn't imagine doing that in my mid-20s. What was that like for you?
I didn't find it scary. I found it just made sense. I saw a clear path how to do this. And no, it was never scary. I think leading the charge has never really been. And at that time, what do you have to lose, right? Like, just go get a job or go to grad school or,
and what do you know? Like, you don't know any different, right?
Exactly.
It's like, if I doesn't, well, I don't know. If it doesn't work, isn't that just how it works? I don't know.
Well,
right?
and again, my parents being entrepreneurs, like, you just, I don't know, one foot in front of the other, just kind of do it. I don't think I knew how much was at risk or how much I was going to have to learn and being a small business owner versus running like a venture-backed business are two completely different things. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of the risk with being a small business owner. Everything that you put into the business is from your own pocket. It's sort of a trade-off each time, and you become a really good operator as a result.
Vanessa, you said you wanted to create, and maybe make sure I get this right. So you wanted to create a business that you wanted to create that was like true to who you are, but you also wanted to create a business that treated people the way you wanted to be treated. Yep. What did that look like? I'm super curious because that's pretty profound. Especially, I'm much older than 24 now, and it's like it's taken me years to figure this stuff out. Like, what did that mean to you back then?
Yeah, I really wanted to create something where we were all on the same team, part of a team. I had developed a lot of skills in teaching and tutoring. I'd worked, as teacher's assistant, like dental, and I felt like I had a lot to offer other people, young people who wanted to work for me, peers who wanted to work for me. And so we did a lot of trainings. We did a lot of teamwork, team sessions. That kind of support I felt was really, really important. And then to run a company that was really transparent and really honest and was really built around what was best for each individual student. And all the decisions that we made were always about what was best for each individual student, from pricing to, how to structure kind of the plan for each student. We would graduate students who we felt didn't need our support anymore. We wouldn't just kind of continue to collect the checks. I feel like there was a lot of room to do this in a really honorable way. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
What did transparency mean to you? Because that's a really interesting concept. I'm fascinated by organizations that default to open and are very clear about, their decisions, but there's always a line. And I'd love to hear more what that meant to you.
Yeah. There were lots of things. It's a good question. Transparency in the beginning was just about being really clear about, who we are, how we're doing to the other people on the team. I wanted to make sure they knew how we were doing, how we were expanding, how the company was growing. To the customers, I wanted to make sure that they knew, who we were, the background on all the people that we employed. And then we actually had an incident where there was some allegation against one of our tutors. And I was probably 27, maybe, when this happened, 26, 27. And there was a pretty major allegation against one of the tutors, and the police were involved. And
Wow.
And actually the family called me and said, here's something that we think happened at our house. And it was probably the worst day of my life. Like, this is exactly the kinds of things that you wouldn't want to have happen. And the family said, what do we do? And I said, we call the police right now. Like, before I do anything else, we call the police. And we called the police. So we did. The family's like, oh, we don't need to do that. Maybe we just handle this. And I said, no, like, we need to call the police. And then I wrote a letter to every single customer and family that we had, and to share with everybody what was going on, encourage the police to reach out, to make sure that there was no other issues with any of our tutors.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those moments that was just like a defining moment for me. And like, how you handle this it says everything about who you are, who your company is. One of those, I don't mean to go to such like a deep story or like, but like, this is the stuff that happens, right? Like, when you're a business owner, good things, beautiful things happen, and difficult things happen, and your name is tied to everything that happens. And I think so. Transparency for me, I wasn't actually planning on talking about this one, but transparency was everything, and I think it got us through. And we had the support of the communities that we worked in, and all the families, and I still have a great relationship with that family today. And I think it's just how you handle it, and that people know that you're being honest, and that there's nothing hidden behind the curtain. I still operate that way today. We just had a meeting at ZeeMee, and we went through all the financials of the company with every single employee. So everybody knows exactly where we are. Whenever anything happens, everybody at the company knows that they can count on me to be as clear as possible and as transparent as possible.
Oh, Peter, I was just going to say, so if transparency is like a core value, did that come from a lack of transparency at one point in your career?
No.
Or just you just knew that?
Yeah, no, it never. I have experienced working in an environment where I didn't have all the information, but this was before that. So no, I think it just has always been a part of my style, I guess. I think, I was senior class president in high school, and same rules applied. Captain of a sports team, same rules apply. Like, it's just people do better when I find that people do better when they trust that they know everything. Then it takes that anxiety out, and then we can all just kind of like, march in the same direction.
I have two questions about that. Oh, a comment and a question. The comment is, I completely agree, because I think the lack of transparency creates false narratives.
Yes.
And just things can spin, and stories can emerge in people's brains because they don't have access to the right information to actually understand what's going on. And I it's something I think about a lot, and it's really fun to hear somebody who's doing it and doing it well, because it can be scary, because you're putting yourself out there.
Absolutely. But I find that your name is associated with all of this anyway. Your reputation's associated with it all anyway. And so, to just put it out there and make sure that everybody knows because transparency is where trust comes from. And the most important thing you can have with a customer or with an employee is trust, I think.
Is this a lesson your parents taught you? I mean, did you see how did?
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. My parents were amazing at just fostering trust in our family, and we could talk about anything, and we didn't always have to agree, but we could talk about anything, and I could just be who I was, and there was a lot of strength in that.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Empowerment.
how then, as you were developing your first business, like at what point did you think, I may have something that somebody may want to acquire? Like, did it just come out of the blue?
I
Because
never thought of that. No, that I never really had an exit strategy in mind. I thought maybe someday I would just kind of wind it down and go start another one, and do something else. They actually approached me. We met sort of just I don't know, serendipitously
they
in
being
San
Rev,
Francisco. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. So Rev is this great company in San Francisco. They do they've got some incredible tech now that does language processing and stuff. But they at the time were doing translation, transcription. They had built this business on leveraging the sort of underutilized at-home workforce. So people who are home for any number of reasons have a lot of skills and can do different kinds of work. And so they started with captioning and translation and transcription and something that somebody can just sit at their computer and do these jobs. And they were looking to get into another vertical and expand to other workforces, people with other skills. And they saw a lot of opportunity in education. I happened to meet them at like a Friendsgiving party in San Francisco. And we just chatted all night and they were like, can we pick your brain about education? We're, exploring getting into it. And so we just continued the conversation over, lunch and just got together over and over. And then I kind of joined them as a consultant for a little bit. And then they approached me and said, what if you come on full time? And I said, no, I have a company. I'm doing great. Like we're all doing great. And they said, well, what if we got that too? And I was like, that never occurred to me. Yeah, sure. Let's talk about it. So,
how did that fit?
Yeah.
Like, did you have a piece of technology, or were you mainly a services-based organization?
It was mainly services-based. Yeah, we were very early days in remote tutoring. So my tutors were available via Skype, so we kind of expanded our reach that way. But then we also found that even students who a tutor could drive to needed support in between those sessions. And so that's kind of where the remote support kind of sprang from, I guess.
Yeah.
And so we started doing Skype tutoring. We started doing like text, student would take a picture of the problem that they're working on, and then the tutor could just text them back some ideas and some information, or they could just hop on a quick phone call and talk through it, or they could, again, hop on Skype or something like that. Then I found that the tutors were drawing out solutions and kind of drawing out these, so they'd get a problem texted from the student, and they would kind of write out like, here's how you do this, not like in a way that was just so the student could just copy it, but it was instructional. Like they would write out, they would take the time, these amazing humans would take the time to just, not expecting to get paid initially, they'd write out these step-by-step solutions to teach the student. And that was really resonating with the audience. Rev and I were talking about this and we were like, wait a second, there's a there. Like there's a product here. And so our very first product that we tested actually was something very similar to that. So it was once they finally bought the company and we started building a different business, our very first product was actually something very similar to that, which was text a problem and have a credentialed teacher record a video teaching you how to solve the problem.
Kind of like a little, almost con-like.
It was totally like a personalized con experience. It was really cool.
So I want to know more about your director of product role there, because that's a really interesting transition from being the CEO of a tutoring business to being a director of product at I assume a fast-growing technology-based Bay Area business.
Yeah.
But before we even go there, like, okay, so you were your own boss for 8+ years, and now you've got bosses.
Yeah.
Like, what was that like for you?
Super hard.
Curious. Yeah,
super hard. Yeah. And these are like the most amazing people. I loved working with some of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with at Rev. And yet I did feel like I was like a stallion that needed to be broken a little bit. And even before it, when I go back like to high school, my parents owned a restaurant. I worked in the restaurant in the evenings, on the weekends, and I was just this little like pipsqueak, and I was managing the restaurant by the time I was like 14. And so I was the manager in the restaurant, managing people who were, twice my age. And so I always sort of had that kind of sense of responsibility, and then here all of a sudden, and even then, like, I didn't feel like I was working for my parents or anything. I felt like this was our family business and I'm in charge, and so this was really my first experience of really driving for somebody else's vision and somebody else's path. And it was tough initially. I think the hardest part at the very beginning was working in an office and having all the noise. And I went to Jason, the CEO, and he said, how's it going? And I said, I don't know. How does anybody focus when everybody's talking all the time and like people are on the phone? And so the next day I came to work and he had like some noise canceling headphones on my desk for me.
I love it.
Yeah, which was really nice. But no, it was so fun. I mean, this was like, there is nothing better than building a product from scratch. There is nothing more invigorating than building a product from scratch and whiteboarding every day and being able to say, what if it worked like this, and then have the most brilliant people on the planet build it. It was so much fun. And I trained under, I did some product work before with Scholar Station, but I trained under Mark Chen, who is a mentor of mine, and he's just brilliant product mind. And so it was really fun to work with him and to really train and refine my own product skills. But it was a highlight of my career was that period of time for sure.
So, when you were talking about Scholar Station, it seemed to me that like transparency was a really big part of your leadership philosophy. And then you get to Rev, and how big of an organization was Rev at that point?
I think it was still small. There was like 16 of us or something in the early days. And then, and then by the time I left, it was probably about 80, I think.
Wow.
So it really grew.
It grown.
Yeah, quite a bit.
What did you extract leadership-wise there? I mean, I love hearing about people's careers because each stop along the way adds something new, like adds a new piece, like square to the tapestry. Like what did you add?
I think I learned a lot of really good things. I lean on things that I learned particularly from Jason and from Mark in when I was there. There's something that Jason would say all the time. Where he really pushed me to always back up everything that I came to him with, right? And like always back up stuff that I came to him with. And so because he would say, if all we have are opinions, mine wins. And I was like, that's pretty good. I find myself like finding a maybe nicer way to say it now, but the idea is good, like, to always kind of back up what you're saying. But these guys were just so, they pushed us all to always be our best and to bring our best self to work. And Mark I think what I learned from Mark Chen, was that the responsibility of a boss, of a leader, of a manager is to make sure that the people that they manage are always growing and I feel that I say that to employees every day, that my job is to make sure that everybody's set up for their next job. I don't want everybody to feel like I need them to work with me forever. I know that they won't, but I hope that the time that they work with me, they learn, they grow, and they are really ready for whatever the next step in their career is. And I'll be the first one to cheer them on and be in their corner and support them. We actually don't lose employees at ZeeMee very often, but I want to make sure that, when we do, it's always a level up. It's always a new opportunity. And that I really took from Mark. That I think was incredible leadership to really take care of his team.
I've had mentors like that over the years that, clearly looked at your success as their success, whether it's happening there or elsewhere. But what I've found is that sometimes it's hard for folks who hear that message to actually absorb it. They're like, are you saying you don't want me here? Like, what's
right?
Like that. Yeah. And it's never the case is always no. Like I if you're crushing it and somebody takes just to seize that talent and hires you, well, we've benefited along the way, right? And
Right.
I'm a firm believer in karma. Like if you do good things for people, good things will happen for you.
Yeah.
But have you experienced that? Like, have you talk about if that's been a thing for you?
Yeah, I would love for employees to stay with me forever. And I think that they know that. But be a ZeeMee lifer would be fantastic. But I hope that they always feel that I make decisions for them to help kind of help them grow. And so, whatever that is, I also really rely, something I really learned at Rev, I was super autonomous. I mean, I got to make a lot of decisions, especially in the early days. And I got to make a lot of decisions, I did better. I didn't do as well later on when I felt I didn't have as much freedom to make as many decisions. There were a lot more eyes on us. It was later. The board was paying attention to how this subsidiary business was doing. And so there's a lot more pressure, and my creativity squashed. And I noticed that I wasn't as good, and as I started to kind of lose some of my own kind of way a little bit, and faith kind of in myself. But the times when I was trusted and autonomous, I came up with the best ideas. And so our team at ZeeMee, I also say to them all the time, like each one of them is their own CEO of what they work on. They need to make their own decisions. They need to fight for what they believe in. They need to have the sort of space to be as creative as possible. And if I'm on top of them all the time telling them what to do, then that's one person's probably not very good idea. They're better at their area than I am. I'm not a marketer. I'm not a data expert. I'm not an engineer. If I'm in there too much in their space, then none of us is going to do well. The business won't do well.
I think that Vanessa comes from being confident in your own skin.
Yeah.
Right? You don't feel threatened, or you're able to know what you know and what you don't know. You've always been like that? Or are those just lessons you've learned along the way?
Yeah, good question. I think confidence has definitely come with age, I would say. Yeah. I think, there's a lot of imposter syndrome over the years. I think that's normal. I think every founder has moments of imposter syndrome. And I think now I just want the best people around me. Rev was also very competitive. At the time that I was there, it was a pretty competitive place to work. And so there was a lot of sort of just second guessing and that kind of thing. And I don't really have that anymore. I just want the smartest people around me who know everything about their area. And I know that I'm a killer operator who can bring really good people together. And so if I have confidence in that, you bring what you do and we will, take over the world.
Yeah, I love it. And is that where your next stop? Because Rev was interesting because you were the director of product, but then you spun off a subsidiary called Elves. And I'm curious, like, how did that happen? And was some of the stuff we're just talking about feeding into it, or like,
so that was sort of the plan all along. I don't think we had a name for it, but when they acquired my business sort of evolved into Elves. So I ran this product division. There weren't that many of us, but this piece of product for Rev, while we were sort of getting my original business transitioned and building this product for Elves. So Elves was a globally scaled remote tutoring business. And so this was like 2013, 2014. This is like age of Uber for everything kind of a business. So we were Uber for tutoring. A student could pull up their phone out of their pocket, push a button, and within 20 seconds connect with a credentialed teacher who was somewhere in the US. The student could be anywhere in the world, but the teachers were all in the US. And these teachers were like moms on maternity leave, recently retired math teachers. It was spectacular. Like the quality, the people that we worked with, we recruited about 400 tutors. And they were just amazing, talented people who just care about students and wanted to interact with students, but weren't in a classroom all day long anymore. And so the students could push this button, connect with this tutor, drop into a shared whiteboard, see the tutor and talk to each other. They could upload their homework. They could work in this whiteboard, write on the homework. They could change pages like in a notebook. So it really simulated a lot of what we did with this very, high touch tutoring business that I had before. We translated that through technology into a very high touch tutoring model that was all on their phones. It was amazing. And then afterwards, students would get a copy of the session. They could watch it again. They would get the notes so that they could read the notes again. All the things that we knew worked really well in real tutoring sessions. It was really fun. That was a fun thing to build.
My brain is firing, so I've got all these questions now that I want to ask about that connected to ZeeMee, but I'm going to hold on because I'm curious about a couple of things. But did you own the P&L? Like, was that all you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, ran the whole thing. I mean, we ran it for about 4 years, scaled it up. It was a really cool part of the business. And Jason, the CEO of Rev, and I shared a real passion for sort of the future of education and democratizing access to really good quality education, because this is the kind of tutoring that people would pay a lot of money for, and that is really limited to a certain segment of society where there's wealthier kids getting access to this quality tutoring every week, and we were doing it for fraction of the cost, and because technology sort of supported it, and so we could hire tutors in different places, and it just was really special to be able to give students who would never have access to this kind of tutoring like that on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, whenever they needed it.
So then how did that lead you to ZeeMee? Like, what was that? What was the story there?
So I had my first son. He's now 5. I've got 2 boys. And I had my son Shay, and took a little time off from Rev. They had a generous leave policy, so generous in the U.S. So I took like 3 months off, and I came back, and it started to feel like it maybe was a good time for me to transition out from Rev. I'd been there for 4 years. We'd scaled this product up, and it started to feel like maybe it was time for me. I have that entrepreneurial kind of spirit, and I was starting to get itchy to just kind of go do something else. So I gave my notice, and about 2 months after I gave my notice, I left in May of 2018, and knew I just wanted to start something fresh and do so. I started researching what should my next business be? I'm going to launch something new. And so I was in that kind of research phase. My husband and I took our baby, who was now 8 months old, and we went to Iceland, and we rented an RV, and we spent almost a month in Iceland, driving around the country. And it was so fun. And then we did some other adventures over that summer, and I was just kind of trying to figure out what is my next venture? And a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, who's also a founder in the San Francisco area, texted me or something, and he said, "Hey, I've got a friend's company is looking for a new CEO. Would you be interested? It's in ed tech and kind of in college mission space." And I was like, "Oh no, I'm gonna start my own thing. I've got my own thing. I'm gonna kick off." And he's like, "Oh well, shoot, I already gave them your information." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so then my phone rang the next day, and it was one of the board members. And so I had checked out ZeeMee and stuff. And this board member and we must have talked for an hour and a half. And it just made so much, I could just see the path of the company. And ZeeMee was in kind of rough shape at the time. So it had about 3 months of runway. Okay. And so it was you could say it was a big bet, or it was just a no-lose situation. What's the worst that can happen? I'm back here again in 3 months.
I was going to say, you're back to 2006 starting a tutoring company, right?
Yeah, exactly. Here I am again. Yeah.
So when I first knew ZeeMee, it was the product at the time was basically a portfolio-based service. You could upload your things and share kind of the personal side of your story with colleges. But then it's gone through this massive pivot and it's caught fire, where you're more of a community tool now for individual colleges.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right? Like, do I
You
have
are.
that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you are. So the original product was all about adding a video or some photos sort of with your college application process. And this is like classic product. You see people actually using a different part of your product, a little, different than you intended, differently than you intended. And so I think with this one, what we saw was that people really wanted to connect with each other, and they really wanted to connect with the schools, maybe not so much about, recording these videos and sprucing up their application, but more about just getting to know other people and making the right decision. And so that was the path. When you see people kind of forging their own path in the woods as a product person, you pave the path. And so that's kind of where community came from, and ZeeMee today came from this community product.
The power of community is unbelievable. I mean, I've experienced it on so many different levels over the last 5, 6, 7 years. I'm curious though, when you were talking about Mouth Elf and the instant connection that a person would, a student would have with a teacher, did any of that find its way? Did you make the connection from what you were doing there as to how it would resonate, or just how the concept would resonate with
That's
colleges?
a good question. I don't think that was where I felt the most kind of transferable experience from my career. I think I'd been supporting this population my entire career, and I knew the anxieties and the pressures and just the isolation that people feel when they are learning, when they're applying to school. And that's something that I was really passionate about supporting. And so I think that's, whether you support it through giving people new tools and skills to help them level up, through actual tutoring, college advising, that sort of thing, or you're giving them community to lend that kind of support and reduce anxiety and help you feel more connected and be more successful. That feels more transferable to me.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. So we're going to get more into ZeeMee, where it is today, but you said earlier, you walked in with 3 months of runway. What did you do?
Well, so that was one of the harder parts, cut burn. So that is kind of the tough beginning, is to kind of trim everything down first to extend that runway. And then also sunset. There was that existing original product was still kind of in the mix, and it was pulling focus. So we had to kind of sunset that and really hone in on, singular focus. I'm a product person, so I really strongly believe if you build it, they will come. And we hadn't built it yet. Where the product was when I joined, the app was crashing and the sales team was way too big, and they were trying to sell something that wasn't really working. And so we trimmed it all down and switched the balance. And so we grew the product and engineering team and trimmed down the sales team and really focused on building something that worked, and then trusted that people would purchase it once and use it once it was, in place and all the pieces were in place. And that proved true. So I raised about 6 months after I joined, raised some money on sort of what we'd accomplished and the vision that we had. And then we were kind of off to the races from that point. And we actually only hired our first VP of sales this January. So we were relying on inbound traffic and word of mouth, and we grew to all of these colleges, over 180 colleges, just on inbound traffic, because the product is really solid.
Well, it's also you hit number 13 on the App Store.
We did. Yes.
That's
we did.
Incredible.
Yeah.
That helps.
Incredible. Yeah.
It does.
That does help.
It's great to be up there with the top social apps, and here we are, this little, college app that is not so little anymore.
No, not at all. I don't want to leave those first 6 months for it yet, because that sounds like it was the hardest part of your tenure.
For sure.
What did you take away from that? I mean, I know, if you build it, they will come, right? You had to get that product focus, but was there anything else in there?
I think that's where that transparency was really important, right? Because it's so important when you come in to take over an existing team. That's very different than building a team from scratch. And what could be more important than giving these? I mean, I felt so responsible for every single person on the team. And, while initially before I knew anybody, I could say, oh, 3 months we're out of business. What does it matter if I fail at this? But, you meet everybody and it matters. These are people who rely on these salaries. And so to make those decisions about cuts, that, headcount cuts, was very hard. Those conversations were incredibly hard. And then to have people trust you and to trust, I think one of the most important things when you do cuts like this, and it's certainly relevant right now with so many businesses making all of these cuts. And I was actually just talking to some people on my team about this the other day, because there was a company, I won't say who did a cut, and it was like a small cut. And it's like, if you need to really communicate as much as you can around these moments to the team so that people know when they feel safe again. Because otherwise, if you're just kind of doing these little haircuts here and there, everybody feels like they're always on the chopping block. And there's never any security. And what I learned from my own career is when there's no security, or if you don't feel, whatever it is, autonomous, if you don't feel supported, if you don't feel like there's transparency, your creativity and your ability to do your job well shuts down. And so that was really important to say, here's the moment where we're making some cuts. We're making cuts in a lot of different areas, but headcount obviously is the most personal. And now that moment's done. And so we got everybody together once that was done. And we had a meeting where I said, here's exactly where we are. Here's where we are, financially. Here's where we are. Here's where everything is. And here's where we're going. And here's why you can trust that I'm going to get you there. And I think we bonded together, and it really took us to the next step.
Yeah. How, so you're definitely being entrepreneurial within the company, Vanessa, but it's not yours. So I assume you have a board and bosses.
I do.
How's that going?
I do. I have an amazing board, a super supportive board who did not invest in me initially. They did invest in me in this last round that we raised. And so they had invested in me, but I was not the original person who they invested in, though they were the ones that brought me in. They're incredibly supportive, but it is different. I mean, I've matured in my career as well.
Yeah,
it's easier for me to. I'm not that wild stallion anymore that doesn't like to be told what to do. I now have a more self-confidence in myself to push back and to say, here's where I think we should go, but I'm open to ideas. And I think I've grown a lot. I think I was a pretty headstrong, younger person. Yeah, that I am now.
You think that's experience, time,
all of
all
it,
the above?
Yeah,
all of
wisdom,
the above,
right?
Yeah,
Wisdom,
and you know what? I think being a mom is helpful. I think like just having sort of the greater picture always in place. Having children kind of does that to you, I think, and so I think there's just a sense of perspective that and calm, because life is crazy all over the place. And, work is one thing where I feel there's just always I feel a straight path. And I enjoy the advice of the board. I really lean on them heavily. I look forward to talking and getting that kind of support and getting, working collaboratively with them. So it doesn't feel quite the same as like a, boss with his like thumb on me. Yeah.
So ZeeMee has been a remote-based company for a long time now, right?
Yeah. So, we were about half and half, half in the office in Redwood City and half remote. And then 2020 hit, and that was a really difficult year for us. There were some months where I wasn't sure we were going to make payroll, because it was just, we had a $5 million investment lined up in February. We had a term sheet signed. We had plans for all the money. And in March of 2020, the world changed.
Yep.
And that money fell apart. And so we were really had to tighten our belts and cut burn. And we've actually cut burn every year I've been at ZeeMee, and we've grown revenue. I mean, we're over 10x last year where we were when I started. And so we've grown, revenue significantly. But that was a year where we had to cut burn, and we sort of wiggled out of our lease, and we were in a 3-year lease, and it was a bit of a wiggle, but we got ourselves out and saved some cash there. And by the end of the year, colleges were spending again, and we were in fine shape. But it was tough. Yeah, we had to tighten things.
How do you manage a remote workforce? There's all this tension about remote, hybrid, in office. If you don't see everybody, you can't build culture. And like, I'm not going to cast judgment one way or another, but I'm curious, like, how do you manage it?
So ZeeMee has the best culture of any place I've ever been. And I don't see any of these people in person. I'm always surprised at how tall people are when we get together in person.
Yeah, I know, right?
And we joke and we're like, oh, you've got legs, it's surprising. Best culture of anywhere I've ever worked. We get together all week long, every day at 2 p.m. Pacific. We have some sort of event where the whole company gets on, and we do. So on Fridays, it's just happy hour. On Thursdays, I'll work backwards. On Thursdays, we do a Thankful Thursday where everybody comes and just says what they're thankful for, somebody on the team who did something that they appreciate. On Wednesdays, we do this, we call it Wisdom Wednesdays, and you come with some random fact, some random piece of knowledge. Like, I learned that Dolly Parton once lost a celebrity lookalike contest to a Dolly Parton impersonator. I didn't know that.
And you're
fabulous.
Never going to forget, right?
I will never forget it. So,
right.
And it sparks really fun conversation. And, so we do that. We do these fun things every Friday in the morning. We do an all hands, and we go around and everybody kind of shares what's going on in their department. And then we play games. We play a lot of code names.
That's cool.
And so it's fun. Everybody's a family, and we've got about 25 employees, little more than that if we include some part-timers, and it's just the best. I feel so close to everybody. Everybody knows every partners' names, kids' names, dogs' names, and we're a very close company, very, very close. We do workouts together on Zoom.
That's great.
That's great. Love it. Did that exist before you got there though, or is that you?
I think it's Adam, our co-founder, Adam and I, and Minnie, our CFO. I think we three as a team kind of brought this energy. I think,
That's awesome.
It's been something that
leave.
They don't leave. It's something that we've been very conscious about, and we think about it a lot. We think about culture a lot, and also work-life balance a lot, and make sure that that everybody's living their fullest life and doesn't, not just in work.
I was just listening to a podcast with Jason Fried from Basecamp, and he was talking about how he looks at his company as a product, always iterating on the company, the culture, the things that they do to support employees, and just thinking about it with that kind of product roadmap, and how do we keep growing and making it a better place to work. I thought that was an interesting concept.
Of course he thinks about it that way. That's great. I love that. Yeah, it is. It takes, I wouldn't say I think about it like a product. I think about it more like how consciously I think about raising my family. These are people, and these are relationships, and we need to nurture those relationships and take care of them. And I'm constantly changing things within our family. My husband and I are constantly looking at it again. Are we doing this the right way? Are we, and I think Adam, Minnie, and I do that too. What else, where are we falling down? What else could we be doing? What do people need right now? What do they need to grow? What do they need to feel closer? And how do we support everybody so that everybody's doing their best work? The happier people are, and the more connected they feel to each other, the more likely they are to work cross-functionally. The more likely, which we get so much more out of when people are easily like tapping each other on the shoulder and saying, can you help me with this thing? And then they come to work happy, and they come to work, opening their laptop and looking forward to seeing their colleagues. And everything is better when everybody is kind of feeling more settled and centered and at peace. Yeah.
And do they feel empowered to bring difficult things to you? Like, is that part of the transparency piece?
I hope they do. I hope so. It's hard for me to answer that question.
Sure.
People do bring hard things to me. I hope that people don't. It's not like everybody has to just say yes all the time.
Right.
But I think so. I mean, we noodle on some really tough stuff as a team, and that can be brought up by anybody, and anybody can push back on everything.
I'm just thinking about like the transparency piece and how that builds into happiness. Like if you know where you stand, then that kind of pressure or concern or fear hopefully gets mitigated to a large extent. And
yeah,
Brendan, you remember Chuck Will at Proctor Academy? I don't know if you ever came across Chuck, Vanessa, but he was like the voice of this school in New Hampshire, and he was so progressive and ahead of his times. He was blogging in like 1999 before it even existed. But I remember I talked to him once, and he said, you got to give the good and the bad, because if all you give is the good, nobody's going to believe you. And I'm like, that is so true. And that just speaks back to transparency and being open.
For sure.
Yeah. Vanessa, I'm wondering too, you've had this great career, you've been really successful, and you're a woman in tech.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot about, you said, guy. What's that been like? Is that a superpower for you? Has it been problematic for you? Love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the stats just came out for like funding for women-led businesses, and we dropped again. We hit a peak of 2.7% of all funding in like 2019 or 2020, and now we're at 1.9% of all funding goes to women-led businesses. So some of it just is kind of awful, and isn't great. I think there's a superpower in the sense that recruiting a more diverse team just comes naturally, because I think the default is that people tend to try to recruit people who are like them, and you have to proactively go after other people who are not like you. And I think that, so hiring women makes a lot of sense to me. And so I have to proactively, I'm a white woman, I have to proactively make sure that we are expanding our pools, elsewhere. But I think, it's definitely been a boys' club. I think that was actually, and they've changed a ton since, but that was a big reason why I actually left Rev when I did. I was the only woman in a leadership role there, and it didn't feel great. And it didn't, I really got to experience what it feels like to just feel like an outsider, in a place where you shouldn't be on the outside. Like I was part of this inner circle, and yet I didn't, it didn't feel right. So I think it's been both. It's both a superpower. I think it helps, again, being a woman and a mom helps to manage all sorts of situations, I think, and different personalities, and to operate from a place of empathy, and handle, an occasional tantrum or whatever it is. But I think so on some level it's good. I think on some level it's hard. I think going into like fundraising and meeting with VCs who there's not a woman on their team. It can
it's crazy.
be very uncomfortable.
It's just the world. I've never experienced like the venture world, and I can't even fathom what that's like.
It sometimes feels so. I know this about me, and this is what the stats are, and I'm like completely fall into these stats. I'm exactly what they say women are when they go into these fundraising meetings. I come in with all the data. I come in with all the just like, here's what we've done. Here's where we're going. Look at these numbers. Isn't this amazing? And I think a lot of men, statistically, and what a lot of these VCs are looking for is the energetic Adam Newman type that comes in and is like, here's my big vision, and I think that being a woman, I sometimes feel more pressure to just prove it, like back it up with numbers, back it up with results. And that can sometimes work for you, sometimes can work against you.
Well, I mean, just outsiders looking in, you're proving it every day at ZeeMee. I mean, like, you don't get to 13th in the App Store if you're not doing like some really cool stuff over there. So Vanessa, as we wrap up, I'm curious, like we try to cap our conversations because we go on these reflective journeys, right? And think about all the things that have happened. And as you have had an opportunity to reflect and think, and I'm sure you've done a lot more than the hour we've been together here, right? But like, if you could go down the path again of your career, would you take the same path? Would you do it differently?
I love where I am today, and I would only be here if I took that path. I love where I am today. I can't say it enough. I love what I do every day. I love the people I work with. I would never change that. I don't know. It was a lot of fun. I think overall, like, I've only done things that I'm passionate about and that are fun, and following the things that I enjoy doing has gotten me here. That's awesome. I think so I think I would do it again. I think there's some other things that would be fun. I think having it could have gone to business school or something like that. My husband did that. That sounds like that's a lot of fun. But that wasn't my path. So, and I think that I know I'm a very good operator. And I think that I'm a very good operator because I had a small business first, and because of those experiences, and because my training was really on the street in, forged by fire kind of thing. And so I think that makes me more thoughtful about spend. It makes it easier for me to cut spend. And so I like where I am. I think I would do it all again.
That's awesome. By the way, no better training ground than owning a small business.
No.
No. It goes back to the hot dog.
It does. It all starts with the hot dog.
It's where we started.
My whole life starts with the hot dog.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So Vanessa, thanks again for doing this. Where do you want to send people? Where can they learn more about you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Vanessa Didyk. You can reach me there. I'm Vanessa at ZeeMee.com if anybody ever wants to reach me directly. And you can find us at ZeeMee.com.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks, Vanessa.
Yeah, Vanessa, thank you. Thanks again for coming on. This has been a really, really fun conversation. I've learned a ton, learned a lot of lessons. A lot that I've taken from this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
so
Vanessa.
Fun. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Leadership Backstory. Make sure to subscribe from your favorite podcast player and leave us a review if you like what you hear. We appreciate you sharing your feedback with other listeners. Peter Barron and Brendan Schneider host The Leadership Backstory. Catch you on the next episode.